On today's Film and Whiskey, we're on location at Crafted Cocktail Company, where we're joined by our friend Scott Sauer to break down what it means to blend whiskeys. We talk about his house blends that are served at the bar, and we look at my own Infinity bottle while we review Still Austin, the musician bourbon, and determine if that is the missing link. That's all ahead on Film and Whiskey. Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode. We are coming at you live. I guess it's not live. I keep saying live. We're
not
live
like,
to each other.
I'm recording this though.
Right. Brad and I are looking longingly at each other from about 6 feet away. We're socially distant.
4.
At the Crafted Cocktail Company in Wadsworth, Ohio. If you've been listening to the podcast, you may have heard that we are doing a few segments and a few episodes here at Crafted Cocktail. We are joined by beverage director Scott Sauer today. We're going to talk all about blending whiskeys today. This is kind of a different bonus episode than we're used to, Brad. We're going to talk about what it means to blend whiskeys, at the corporation level, at the bar level. Crafted Cocktail has some great house blends that we're going to drink through today. And then on a personal level, Brad, I have been working on this thing that we call an Infinity bottle for the last 2 years now. I can't wait for you to try it. We'll talk more about what that means, but suffice it to say, you can blend your whiskeys no matter who you are, no matter where you are, and you can make something completely new and completely individual to who you are.
Bob, I want to stump you right now.
Oh, please.
Have you ever seen The Bishop's Wife?
With Cary Grant?
Yeah.
I have, yeah.
Daggone it. Well, when I think of an Infinity bottle, do you know the scene that I think of?
I don't.
When I stumped him, yes. When Cary Grant is sitting with the professor and he keeps waving his hand and his bottle just keeps refilling back up.
That's an Infinity bottle.
It is one of my absolute favorite scenes in all of cinema. And that's what I think of when I think of the Infinity bottle.
So while we talk about blending whiskeys, while we talk about Infinity bottles today, we're also going to be sipping on Still Austin, the musician, straight bourbon whiskey. This is, as you might imagine, a whiskey out of Austin, Texas. I'm super excited to try this. It is a absolutely beautiful bottle design that we're looking at today. And we're going to give it a full review, but then also the added question, does this belong in your Infinity bottle? And is this the missing component of my Infinity bottle? So, Brad, we have a lot of questions to answer today.
So many questions.
Just so many.
I feel like we have so many questions. We need to get the expert in here, Bob.
We do. And so we have brought in Scott Sauer, beverage director of Crafted Cocktail Company. Scott, how are you today, my friend?
Welcome. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about blends and happy to try this Still Austin. I'm curious, what's the significance of the musician on the bottle?
I have absolutely no idea. You've stumped me as well.
Love it.
So this is a newer company, and this is marketed as, I love it when whiskeys say this. It's a straight bourbon whiskey, but on the back it says aged at least 2 years. So you know that
at the very least.
They are just barely meeting the minimum requirements to be called straight bourbon whiskey. I love the artwork, though. I don't know what the musician has to do with it, and we probably should have done our research a little bit more than this.
It seems to me like they are trying to imply that the way a musician kind of combines all the different melodies, harmonies, all the different chords you can work through is the same way that they combine the different grains to build this beautiful palette for you to enjoy.
One
Bob.
could say that they blend it.
That's beautiful. It's got this little muse mermaid artist going on the front that just I'm excited to try it out.
Yeah, so am I. So, guys, let's talk about what it means to blend whiskey. So there are some brands that are known for whiskey blending. And in most cases, what this means, because any distiller is essentially blending their whiskey, they're batching it. If you're not buying a single barrel whiskey in the store, you're buying what is essentially a blend. They're just blending their own stock of stuff. But there are some companies now that are building their brand on buying barrels of whiskey from all over and blending them together to make something completely unique. And I guess one of the most prominent ones doing that right now is Barrel Bourbon, or barrel whiskey, because I guess they're making rye as well. But they are known for taking other people's whiskey, buying barrels of it and blending them together to make different batches. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, they have a couple of big award-winning whiskeys that we've poured at even some of our holiday bourbon tastings. We had the batch 007B, and I'll tell you, at this tasting, it's going up against the Van Winkles, the Antique Collection, the big dogs. And I remember that tasting specifically, the barrel bourbon had the community vote, right alongside. And for a bottle that was much more readily available, it outscored the big dogs. So,
Wow.
They're doing a great job.
Absolutely.
I mean, earlier this season, Bob, we talked to Kenny from the Bourbon Pursuit about their Pursuit United, which I believe is a blended whiskey, and it was out of this world.
Right. And I mean, that's what you get with some of the Bardstown releases, right? Like their Discovery series, they're slowly blending in their own stock of stuff, but I might have that backwards. It's either the Fusion or the Discovery.
Yeah.
Is it the Fusion?
The Fusion is them blending their own stuff. The Discovery series is all blended whiskeys. So
Yeah.
all
Sourced.
older sourced whiskeys.
Okay,
Yeah, correct.
got it.
Because it's a fusion, Bob. Do you get it?
I get it now.
You get it?
And the Discovery is like, hey, discover other people's whiskey.
Oh, man.
There it is. So we know that there are companies that are doing this, right? But you can also be doing this on a more personal, individual level. And that is one of the things that really intrigues me about what Scott is doing here at Crafted Cocktail. When I first reached out to Crafted Cocktail, Scott was super responsive and said that they wanted to get on an episode with us. And the first thing that he offered was, why don't we taste through some of the house blends that we're doing? So Scott is personally taking bottles of whiskey that come into the bar, and he is, through trial and error, finding these incredible blends that he is then also marketing as kind of the house blend for this bar. Scott, I guess I'm just curious, like, how did you get into this idea of blending whiskey? What did the trial and error kind of look like before you hit on this kind of stuff?
Yeah. So the house blend number 1 started 2 seasons ago with one of our bourbon tastings that we did. And we were talking about Kentucky Owl, in fact, as one of the big dogs in blends and the reputation that they garnered over the years. And kind of inspired by that, we wanted to make a house blend to pour alongside these other ones at the tasting. Now, the first house blend that we made was made specifically to be a budget pour. We weren't trying to compete with Kentucky Owl, but we were experimenting, right? So I took 3 of my favorite budget pours to work with as a base and mixed those in equal parts for to fill 2/3 of the bottle. And then that last third was going to be playroom, right? So a couple of different batches, couple of different whiskeys getting added, and it went basically off a flavor profile. Like, okay, and as we've discussed coming into this episode, what is this missing? What does it need? So we ended up adding a couple of barrel finished whiskeys, other stuff that would keep it in the right price range. Mm-hmm. But it was always intended to be something that is a solid sipper on its own, better than the other budget pours in that $30 to $40 a bottle price range, ideally. And something that we could also use for a good classic cocktail like an old fashioned. And I think we just absolutely nailed it. We blew it out of the park on Blend 1. Fast forward a couple of years, we started doing our 10 weeks of whiskey, the live stream flight tasting that you were more than gracious to join us for, and we ended up developing for that 2 more house blends made at that more premium level. The second had the intention for these ones, we weren't so concerned about price, we were concerned about flavor profile. So House Blend 2 was made specifically to be that big, bold, spicy, high rye bourbon, heavy oak, heavy char. And then Blend 3 was made to be more the sweeter, butterscotch caramel, more the buttery mouthfeel that you find in like the Van Winkles and some of the higher end stuff. And those took definitely some trial and error, but I'm just so happy. And as a flight, it's fantastic because you get, this just broad range of styles.
So one thing that we're going to do today, right now, actually, Brad, is Scott has been generous enough to pour out the house blend number 2, which was my favorite of the 3 in the flight that we tried. And we do this because I want us to get a sense of what a really well done blend tastes like.
Before we get to your blend.
Before we get to my blend, because we're going to try my Infinity bottle. And I think my Infinity bottle is missing something. There's just some sweetness missing. There's some sort of like roundness missing there that love. I think Scott has captured here.
So real quick, Bob, let's go over with the audience what exactly an infinity bottle is for those that don't really understand that.
Sure. So an infinity bottle, the way most people try it, or most people do it, is you take an empty bottle, and when you get down to the last couple ounces in a bottle of whiskey that you are sipping on, you put it in a bottle. And that way it's really easy to just allocate a couple ounces from your whiskey into this new bottle. And as you drink more and more different kinds of whiskey, or, for this is all bourbon. So I think I have 20 to 30 different bourbons going on in here right now. And as I got down to the last ounce, half ounce, I would dump it in here. And so we're looking at, in my infinity bottle right now, with all the ones I have blended in there, it's a little bit over 100 proof. I think it's clocking in at about 103 proof right now. But, for most people, it could just be that you fill up like a pint-sized bottle with 2 to 3 bourbons and you try mixing them for the first time. So an infinity bottle can really be what you want it to be. For me, it's that I have so much whiskey passing through my hands nowadays that I just I'll throw an ounce of this in here and we'll see how it comes out.
Just see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
What I love about the concept of infinity bottles is that it's your personal whiskey journey combined into one, right? You get everything. You get it all wrapped up into one piece that is just like your personal journey over the course of tasting and experiencing different whiskeys.
Yeah, it really turns into an experience all of its own, right? And I think the beautiful thing is you can bring friends over. You can have like a whiskey tasting party at your house, if you have a nice little bar to choose from. And at the end of it, you can say, and hey, this is my bottle of whiskey. Right. And obviously we're not out here distilling and producing on our own, but there is something cool about saying, I put work into this. I chose these specific 8 whiskeys to go in here. And that's just something neat that you can put your own stamp on the world of whiskey.
So what we're trying first here is the Crafted Cocktail House Blend number 2. Scott, without giving away the recipe that you've concocted here, what kind of, is this a malted bourbon? Is this a high rye? What are we trying here?
Yeah, so this would be considered that high rye bourbon. Average age is going to be between 8 and 12 years, and this will come in right around 100 proof. The goal was really to kind of mimic some of those high rye MGPs that you see from Remus or Baker's Stag, those heftier char, spicier bourbons.
One of the things that I really love when we drink rye, Brad, and it's a note I constantly get, is that it has that very specific spice combination that you get with colas. And on this one, I can't quite tell. It's somewhere between a cherry soda and a cream soda. And I am absolutely loving it. And it's something that we only ever really get on either high rye bourbon or on ryes in particular.
Yeah, as I get into the nose on this one, this might sound crazy, but it almost reminds me of a gin. It's so spicy and it's got so much going on.
Botanical kind of.
Yeah, it's just florally and the spice is there. And then when I get into the actual taste, holy cow. Mm-hmm. It just blows me away. Like you said, Bob, there's some of that sweetness going on. But for me, it is those floral notes that get paired with the spiciness.
Yeah.
That it's knocking it out of the park for me.
So that's one thing that's nice about doing a blend is it allows you to combine different age ranges and even from different distilleries, right? So you can, if you're finding that your blend after tasting it is getting too spicy or too much in one direction, you can balance that out with something younger or lighter or more floral.
So I'm humbly offering up my my offering here. So as I said, I've been working on this infinity bottle for 2 years now and trying to kind of figure out, it's my first time blending whiskey and I don't like wasting whiskey either. So as I go, I've been trying to tinker with it and say is it spicy enough? Is it sweet enough? Like I said, it's clocking in at 103 proof. It's definitely got some spice. It's definitely got some heat. But guys, I can't get over the sense that this bottle is missing something. And I want to hear your take on what exactly is missing here.
Bob, are you nervous right now?
Mm-hmm.
You're like putting your baby out there for the first time. This is going to be the first time your son goes and plays Little League basketball or something.
I know. Oh, if I may say so, This is pretty damn good. I just took a sip, and it's not bad at all.
I'll tell you right now, the aroma is impressive. I'm getting little to no ethanol. I'm blown away that this is coming in at 103 proof. And it's got this, you said cola earlier. It's lighter than that. But it's definitely reminiscent of a soft drink. And, I'm almost reminded of some of the malt beverages that are out there. I'm getting that sweetness. I'm getting a little bit of chocolate on the nose, almost like cacao powder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, it almost smells like chocolatey, but not sweet chocolate, right? Like a nice bitter dark chocolate.
One thing that I will say that is I'm so impressed by on this blend specifically, and again, in our live stream, we talked about the struggles of finding this with the Blend 3. I'm immediately impressed by the butteriness, the mouthfeel. It coats, it lingers, it sticks, which, that's usually for me the differentiator between a great bourbon and an exceptional bourbon, right? It's all in viscosity, if you will.
He already understands.
I do.
But it's that lingering mouthfeel and oiliness that you get, and this has it going on. So I'm impressed right out of the gates for that.
Yeah, Bob, I think your willingness to continually use higher proof whiskeys has contributed to that. That you're not just throwing every whiskey that we've gotten on the podcast into here, that you're willing to say, we're going to be a little careful here. And I will say, for somebody who's brand new to an Infinity bottle, it does feel like the temptation would be to just start throwing anything in there. And I feel like after a little while, that's going to get a little dangerous to be like, oh, what am I building here?
Right. Well, I will say this is a true 4-grain mix at this point, because it's got Weller Special Reserve, it's got Weller Antique, but on the malty end, it's got Chattanooga 111 in it. On the rye end, we've got tons of high rye bourbon in here. I've got all the different kinds of Bardstown that we've tried in here. I think this actually has a little bit of Pfeiffer Pavitt in it too at some point. So it definitely brings the heat. Guys, I like my sweet bourbons. I think that this might just be missing a little bit of that sweetness that I like as well. And I guess if I could awkwardly segue us into this Still Austin, we needed to try this and sample it, Brad, and give it a full review, because if it's sweet enough, it could potentially be the missing link to make this the perfect Infinity bottle.
Yeah, Bob, like we were talking about before, it's a beautiful bottle. We really love the marketing that they have going on here, but in the end, it's all about the juice. What's going on in the bottle that we can talk about here. And honestly, as I get into the nose, I will say, after trying the 2 blended whiskeys that we've been trying, these Infinity bottles, it's amazing how you can immediately tell, you're like, oh, this is not a blended whiskey.
Right.
You just immediately recognize that difference. And I think that's the fun thing about the Infinity bottles, is that it isn't just your normal whiskey.
Right.
You are getting something special. But jumping into this Still Austin, it is close to being 100 proof, and I'll say that's about where I clocked it at. This is a decently potent whiskey that has some really nice sweet notes on it.
Yeah, I'm really blown away at the fact that this is only a 2-year whiskey. Well, and again, it's a straight bourbon whiskey. It's aged for a minimum of 2 years. So what that means is that they're probably blending it a little bit with some older stock that they have. The youngest in here is 2 years old. You do not usually get these it doesn't smell young to me. It doesn't have that really young grain smell. It has really great honey and peanut butter notes. We've been drinking a lot of Heaven Hill products today, and this kind of reminds me of that sort of Heaven Hill peanut buttery wheelhouse here. I would not have pegged this for a 2-year whiskey.
I'm with you 100% on that one. I will say, it's always the bourbon whiskey industry is just so hard to get into as a startup. It's the one product that you start and you're usually not going to end up with something great for at least 8 to 10 years, right? And during those 8 to 10 years, while you're waiting on your first batch to be done, you got to keep producing and crossing your fingers and hoping that that recipe is going to be good when you finally get to bottling, right? So one thing that I'll have to say about this, and we've talked about Woodinville a little bit, how they actually they age their whiskey on a farm that's specifically has the same kind of climate as as Kentucky, right? So they ship their whiskey to and from their bottling facility specifically to get a better aging climate. And when it comes to Garrison Brothers, I noticed this immediately, and they've won awards for being one of the best new micro distilleries around. They're also Texas based. So trying this one, as young as it is, I'm so impressed. And there's something to be said about that Texas heat and, even humidity that I think really has a huge positive impact. Mm-hmm. And I'm noticing that right off the gates in this still Austin. I'm right there with you. I cannot believe that this is only a 2-year whiskey.
Yeah. Well, and one thing, I'm so glad you brought this up, because if there is one area of the country that I wanted to focus on here, it is this Texas bourbon industry, which is really booming right now. But you see this word kind of being bandied about in the Texas bourbon industry, which you see a lot in the wine industry, which is terroir, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes.
Thank you. And in the wine industry, terroir is the idea that the climate, the soil imparts very specific things to the flavor of the grape. And people are really starting to scientifically try to determine if terroir plays a big role in whiskey production. And I will say every Texas whiskey that I have has a very distinct flavor to it. And you mentioned Garrison Brothers. We tried one of them on the podcast just last season. We really liked it, but it has a unique flavor to it that is just specifically Texas. I think this has that a little bit. And I think it's really interesting that we are identifying regions of the country now that you can kind of, by taste, once you drink enough of these whiskeys, determine like, oh, that's a Texas whiskey.
If I could use one of your favorite words, Bob, would you call it a Texas funk?
There is a very specific funk that comes from Austin, Texas. But, okay, guys, we've tried it. I think it's a really good whiskey. I think it definitely is a little bit alcohol forward. And it has that great peanut buttery, caramely flavor throughout. I don't know if it's the solution to my infinity bottle, but that's not being fair in terms of reviewing this whiskey. Brad, in terms of just the whiskey standing on its own, what do you think of it so far?
Bob, I'm really impressed. I mean, like we said, it sounds like a qualifier, and it kind of is. Like, this is a 2-year whiskey, so we're going to be okay with that for a second and just say this is one of the more impressive 2-year whiskeys I've had. There are peanut butter notes. It's sweet. It's a little bit too alcohol forward, and you could solve that problem by aging it a little longer. So overall, I've been pretty impressed with this.
Yeah, for a new company, I'm very impressed. And especially for, it takes a lot of guts to, if it's over 4 years, you don't have to put anything on the bottle. So
right.
by putting, aged at least 2 years on the bottle, they're admitting we're using young stuff. And that takes a lot of guts. That means that they knew what they were bottling.
Mm-hmm.
They were ready. They're saying, you know what? We're not afraid to put this out at only 2 years and potentially ruin our whole brand because we know what we've got. And they did it. And I'm impressed.
All right. So let's give a final kind of general score on this. Brad, we usually score out of 50. We're not going to consider value here because we're not talking about buying a bottle. But just in terms of like nose, taste, finish, overall balance, we're talking out of 40 then. What kind of a score would you give this one?
Out of 40, I think I'm getting close to a 30. I think I'm at like a 28, 29 out of 30, like a 75 out of 100 sort of area.
Right. And that's comparing it to whiskeys that are much longer aged and at much higher price points and things like that. For a 2-year whiskey to be like, for me, I think this might actually be over the 30 mark. If you're talking out of 100, like, I think it is over a 75 out of 100. This is a really pleasant drinking experience. I would not in any way be ashamed to pull this out and offer it to friends. So what they're doing at 2 years is really kind of mind-blowing. I'm excited to see where this goes at 4 years and beyond from there. Scott, what would you say?
I'm with you 100% on that. And I do. I feel like, I feel like you and I are kind of in agreement that it deserves a couple of extra points just because of how young it is. Mm-hmm. If I take that out of the equation, if I like take that out of the equation, it would be in the mid to high 20s. But considering it's a brand spanking new company, it's a really young bourbon, they're killing it. That gets 5 more points automatically just in my book. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
All right, now I will put myself out there. You've both tried the Infinity Bottle, the Bob Book Blend #1.
The bookish blend.
That's right. What would you say about it in general? What's it missing? And is Still Austin the key to unlocking its potential?
I mean, for how much you have talked about whiskey with me over the past 2 years, that bottle screams Bob Book to me. It has a nice mouthfeel, which I think Scott pointed out really well. It's still buttery. It has a really nice, sweet palate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what else it needs, Bob.
Wow. Oh,
I mean, you're really killing it there. I think that maybe I'm really trying to think if there's anything else you could add in there, but overall, I've been really impressed with it.
now Scott is pulling out a bottle of Angel's Envy finished rye right now. So it sounds like he might know exactly what this needs.
What would you do if he just like opened your bottle and just poured it in?
So truly on this, I loved it. I'm in agreement that I do feel it's got the richness, it's got the oiliness down. The Infinity bottle to me was just a touch grain forward, which is not something that I typically love. And you're right, it was missing a touch of that sweetness. So Angel's Envy rye to me, it's not one of my all-time favorites, but I love it as a mixer or as a blender because it is of all the whiskeys that I've ever tried in my life. This one, 100% to me, has the most distinguishable characteristics. It is straight butterscotch and maple. Every time I try Angel's Envy rye, like you could give this to somebody that's never tasted bourbon, doesn't know how to dig their way through tasting notes, and they'll taste it and immediately off the gates go, oh yeah, that's maple and butterscotch, you know?
Yeah,
Did I just bite into a cookie? So to me, it's so one-dimensional that it's great to work with in something along these lines where, you know, you want that extra touch of sweetness to it.
Yeah.
So, but I personally wanted a little more spice from it. So you wanted the sweetness, I wanted the spice. And we were also talking about the Still Austin. So I actually took what little I had left of those three, added a splash of Angel's Envy rye. I think I accidentally went a little over on the Angel's rye, but I do really enjoy, and I'm gonna share it here with you guys, and we'll see what you think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that immediately added like
Butterscotch.
a layer of butterscotch, but there's also like a pepperiness and a floralness that I don't think were there before either. And that's coming from the rye grain, obviously, but
And from the house blend, I added some of the house blend in there as well.
That's it, man.
that's pretty darn good.
That is
Why we came to Crafted Cocktail Company.
But you created the base, Bob.
You're darn right I did.
That's right.
You're done.
Absolutely.
I will be incorporating as an LLC here in the next 10 minutes. Investors, get in at the ground level.
That's right.
Elon Musk, we're coming for you. Guys, I am so happy that you joined me in this tasting experience today. And we did all this to basically say, no matter what level of your whiskey journey you were at, if you're just getting into whiskey, if you've got a bottle of Jim Beam and a bottle of Jack Daniels on the shelf and that's it, try mixing them together. Try mixing them at different ratios and see what you get. I mean, we've talked about poor man's Pappy on this podcast before. How do you think people hit on that? It's playing around with what you have on the shelf. I think one of the things that I really love about the bourbon world in particular is that in some ways, things are sacred, but nothing's sacred. People encourage play. And I think we do the same thing here on the podcast. So I'm so happy we got to try this Still Austin. I'm so happy I finally got to share this Infinity bottle with you guys. Any final thoughts, Brad?
Don't be afraid of price points. I think that's one of the biggest things when it comes to whiskey is that for the average consumer, like when you spend $80 on a bottle, like there ain't no way in hell that you're going to mix it with something else, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, I'm going to enjoy every last drop of this. And if that is your attitude, like honestly, like it is for me, like I don't blame you. Like I think that's a completely fair attitude to take. But if you're really wanting to experiment and get into it, don't be afraid of those price points. Go ahead when you have a few ounces left of your higher priced whiskeys, throw it into your Infinity bottle if you think it's going to fit the flavor profile that you're going for. Because in the end, if you throw a lot of really high-priced whiskeys in there, chances are it's probably going to come out a little bit better than if you throw, you know, a whole lot of the Springtime of Swill.
Yeah.
And don't feel obligated to do it by the bottle either. You know, you could do it by the milliliter, you know, till you find what you really enjoy, or you could even just take 2 of your all-time favorites, you know, go based off of your own experiences with different flavor profiles. And if you think to yourself, you know, oh yeah, this one's a little too sweet, maybe it would benefit from this one that was a little too spicy for me.
Well, we want to say thank you again to Scott Sauer of Crafted Cocktail Company for joining us today. You can check them out on all the socials at Crafted Cocktail Co., correct?
Correct.
They are well worth following. I think their Instagram is phenomenal as well.
I will say, with the last name like you have, your whiskey sour better be out of this world.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
All right, Brad and I will be back on Monday with another regularly scheduled episode. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And I'm Scott Sauer.
And we'll see you next time.